Hi, I'm Claire, and this is Podcast Recommendations Part 3. This is the third part in a little mini-series I'm doing here on my channel, which basically does what it says on the tin. I'm going to talk about some podcasts that I really like to listen to and that I think everybody should check out. In the first and second parts of this mini-series, I talked about 4 shows each that I really enjoy, and so I'm going to go on in this part to talk about 4 more. If you haven't seen these videos yet and you'd like to catch up, I'll put links in the description box below, as well as some cards on screen now. And now let's get into the shows. First, I want to talk about Magical Space Pussycats, a bookish podcast that is done by 3 of my favourite ladies of BookTube. They are Elizabeth from Books and Pieces, Caitlin from Kitty G, and Chelsea from The Reading Outlaw, who I also happen to be on another podcast with. Now, of course, I love all 3 of their BookTube channels, and I have become friends with all of them in the past few years that I've been on BookTube, so it's not really surprising that I really enjoy their podcasts. It's always great for me to hear more people discussing general happenings in science fiction and fantasy, as well as new releases. I just really enjoy this kind of content. But Magical Space Pussycats is also a book club podcast, and so in every episode, Elizabeth, Caitlin, and Chelsea dig into the lady votes and read an older work of science fiction or fantasy that was written by a woman. There is a general perception of science fiction and fantasy as a very male-dominated genre, particularly if you look at older works. The truth is there were works being written by women from the golden era of science fiction onwards, and it's not just the 2 or 3 female authors that everyone always remembers and cites. There are plenty of older works of science fiction and fantasy written by women, and Magical Space Pussycats explores those and reads and discusses those, and I just really enjoy those conversations. Next, I want to talk about The Infinite Monkey Cage. This is a science podcast from BBC Radio that is hosted by comedian Robin Ince and stargazing rockstar physicist extraordinaire Professor Brian Cox. This is a ridiculously entertaining show. Every episode, Robin and Brian have a panel of a few experts and at least one comedian to come and discuss a subject with them. It has really good conversations about science in a way that I can kind of understand what's going on, but it's also really funny. They are able to have some really good guests on the show. They've had Neil deGrasse Tyson on the show before. I believe they even had Sir Patrick Stewart on one time, and every one of the science guests on the show was nerding out massively because they all said that they got into science because of Star Trek, which was really sweet. The show has a large backlog of several series, so if you do check it out and you find that you like it, there is a lot for you to listen to, and there are a lot of in-jokes and jokes that progress from season to season because they kind of come back to some topics again and again, and they just have some really interesting conversations, not necessarily just about science. They have also talked about philosophy and religion in the past, and I just find it to be a really open, interesting, and funny discussion every time. Next up is the utterly delightful Tea and Jeopardy, which is hosted by Emma Newman and co-written with Peter Newman. This is an interview podcast with a twist. In each episode, Emma Newman interviews an author or an editor or an agent, someone in the science fiction and fantasy community. But the podcast also has a narrative of its own. The framing device of each interview is that the guest is coming to have tea with Emma in her tea lair. When they come in, guests have to present their calling card and discuss a curio that they have brought. At the end of the show, when all the tea is gone and the cake is nothing but crumbs, guests are usually serenaded by singing chickens before having to find their way out of the tea lair and probably facing some mild peril, because Latimer, the butler, may or may not be secretly evil and trying to finish off all the guests. As I'm sure you can tell just by this little summary of what goes on in an episode, this show is utterly delightful and absolutely wacky in the best of ways. And if you listen to the whole backlog of the show from the first episode, you'll be able to spot a bit of a narrative forming where there's some recurring jokes and some bad guys that come back again and again, and Latimer gets himself in trouble and then out of trouble again because no butler is as good as he is at butlering. As you may know, if you keep up with Hugo Awards news, Tea and Jeopardy is also a finalist for the Best Fancast Hugo this year, and I'm very, very happy to see them on this list because I really enjoy what they do. I know I've been nominating them since I first started listening to the show, and it's always a pleasure to be able to vote for them on the final ballot. And finally, for this episode, I want to tell you about the show that is probably my favorite podcast out of all the ones that I listen to at the moment, and that is Witch Please, a podcast about Harry Potter and the world around it that is done by two Canadian scholars called Hannah McGregor and Marcel Cosman. What I love about Marcel and Hannah is that they talk about Harry Potter in the same way that me and my friends talk about Harry Potter, just more intelligently, because they are fans who love the stories but look at them with a critical eye, and that is also how I would choose to define myself as a fan. The thing is, they are both academics and they study text and how text is presented and pedagogy and teaching practices, and they just bring all of that to the fore when they discuss the books. They talk about Harry as an unreliable narrator, or they talk about Hermione as a critical reader who is learning to be more discerning about the world around her. They talk about pedagogy and teaching methods at Hogwarts. They talk about feminism and how feminism is presented through different characters like Molly Weasley or Dolores Umbridge. They talk about representation and about the fact that characters like Tonks or Remus appear extremely queer-coded on the page when we first meet them, but then go on to have a very heteronormative narrative to them in the rest of the story and what that means. As you can probably tell, I am incredibly passionate about this show. I absolutely love it. If you want to check it out, there is a full 2-year backlog of fortnightly episodes about the Harry Potter books, films, games, merchandise, everything that is relevant to the Harry Potter world. Right now the show is on a break because Marcel and Hannah decided to change the release schedule of the podcast to make it more sustainable in the long run. They are now going to be doing series with a set number of episodes each year, and they are coming back with the new summer series in June, which I am ridiculously excited about. If you are a fan of Witch Please who is in or near London and you happen to see this video in the first week that it is out, then you should check the description box below for a link to the Witch Please website, because there is going to be a meetup with Hannah McGregor in about a week's time from when I'm filming and releasing this video. It's going to be on April the 23rd, and I'm so excited. I'm definitely going to be there. So that's it. These were 4 more of my favorite podcasts. I would definitely recommend that you check them out and give them a listen. Let me know in the comments down below if you've tried any of them, if you enjoy them, or if you've got any podcasts that you love that you think I would enjoy too, based on what I discussed in this video. If you'd like to see more from me, you can check a recent video over here, and if you haven't yet, please hit that subscribe button that's on my face right here for more videos from me every week. I've been Claire, thanks so much for watching, and see you soon. I don't know if you can hear the cat, but she's snoring real loud.